I'm Coffee Kevin. This year, a minor miracle happened to me. At a time of the coronavirus, as the event business was frozen, I got a phone call from Jacques Shalo, who told me he owns a company called Java Master. Not only had I heard of it, I'd been a fan virtually from its inception. Turns out Jacques is an entrepreneur who builds one of the only shop coffee roasters, small enough, quiet enough, and green enough to place in a public space like a grocery store. He became a sponsor, but I also told him I wanted to tell his story, as I think it's pretty compelling to our audience. So we have him visiting us via camera today. And Jacques, thank you for being a guest today.
Yes, thank you, Kevin. Real pleasure.
I got to start off by asking you. You have a really interesting background for someone who owns a roaster manufacturer, and you're not from around here. You're from Cameroon, right?
That's correct, Kevin. I was born in Cameroon in West Africa, and so that's where I'm originally from.
How did you get into the coffee business?
Yeah, so basically, I was born in a coffee farm. My family owned about 500 acres of coffee. We planted Arabica and Robusta coffee. So the farm plantation was practically my playground growing up, and I helped the sharecroppers cultivate, harvest, and prepare green beans for shipment to different companies around the world. So with that background, I know enough about the farming side and preparation of coffee for distribution internationally. So that's my background and what brought me into coffee.
It's fascinating and I think really good for the industry myself, but what is it that really attracted you to purchasing a company that is a roasting company as someone who comes from a farm background?
Yeah, no, interesting. So I went on. I came to the United States, went on to do different things in software, and sort of left my coffee background behind me, and so did many of my siblings. But my mom passed in 2013 at the age of 106, and considering that she was the main motivating person in the family that helped cultivate the farm, the rest of my siblings pretty much challenged me to go do something about the farm. So I started to do some research to understand a bit more about the coffee business, because I understood the farming side, but I needed to understand the entire value chain of coffee, from the farmers, the shippers, and the importers, and the roasters, and then the companies that are the coffee shops that are making the finished cup. So as I did the research to figure out, okay, if I'm going to get into the business, what aspect, which stage in the category of the business am I going to get involved in? But my research basically pointed me to the fact that 68 cents of every dollar, that's 68%, in the value chain is in the hands of the roaster. So at first I didn't quite understand that, but the more I looked into it, it makes a lot of sense. Coffee doesn't taste or smell or, it's very bland when it comes from the farm, but the application of heat to it converts it into a completely different product, right? So many chemical compound changes, the common person sort of, we get this phenomenal aroma, right? It just smells so great. But with that process of roasting and heating the coffee, it transforms into a different product. So that group is really converting the raw material into the finished product, and they have a variety of ways they can bring the product to market, right? They can sell it in bags, grind it, make different types of finished cup with it. So it became very clear to me that I needed to get involved in the roasting side of the business. And then, serendipitously, through some friends, I ran into a company that introduced me to the roasting process in Belgium. And lo and behold, the company that manufactured these roasters was based in Michigan, right here in the US. So when I was state bound, I basically reached out to them and learned a lot more. And I loved the entire process of roasting as the only alternative method of roasting, next only to the drum roasting process. So I took that really interested me, and I did more research, and it became very clear to me that that is a process that I needed to get involved in the roasting side of the business.
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned air roasting. I interviewed Michael Sivitz years ago, obviously the late Michael Sivitz, so it's been a while. And I also interviewed Ian Burston, and Ian came out with a roller roaster in the late 90s, which was also air roaster. So I remember also the controversy at the time of air roast versus drum roast, and this probably goes beyond some of our audience interests, but so I'll lightly touch on it, but I would like to touch on this with you. A little myth busting on air roast, if we can.
Yeah, so I mean, it's interesting that you bring up Michael Sivitz, and you've been around the industry enough to have met somebody like that. Michael was probably the single most experienced mechanical engineer going back many years, and all the big coffee companies hired Michael to make recommendations on their roasting processes, right? The big drum roasting processes, the temperature of the of how you heat the coffee and for how much time and all that. Well, Michael concluded that after many years of consulting with them, he concluded that that process of drum roasting, which again, not to go into the details, but you basically have gas, powered flames that is conducting heat to a big drum, and you have millions of pounds of coffee in the drum rolling around. Well, you see, the beans that comes from the farm has a filament over it, and it becomes what's called a chaff during the roasting process. The bean shrinks and the chaff falls off. Now, what happens in the drum roasting process is that at 450 degrees plus, as the bean is roasting, the chaff comes off faster because it's lighter in texture than the bean that you're trying to roast. Well, it starts charring and basically burning faster than the bean is cooking. So you get sort of an influence of the bitter taste, the charred taste from the chaff, which is imparted to the beans. Again, I'm not here to qualify whether the process is good or bad. I think it's just a different process. But Michael concluded that that process was, it had some issues. So he invented this other process called fluid bed roasting, which is basically air roasting. What you're doing is you're levitating the green beans in a roast chamber, and then as the bean shrinks at 450 degrees plus, the chaff comes off, and with the forced hot air levitating the beans, you create a vortex using a cyclone that exhausts the chaff. So you end up with a much cleaner taste. You're convectionally heating the bean directly without the chaff in the roast chamber. So not to get too technical, but that's really what the process of air roasting is versus what drum roasting. So Michael concluded that this process, because it's much cleaner, is a process that he wanted to develop, more technology around. So he built the first fluid bed roaster that was supposed to be competing with the drum roasting process, roasting large quantities of beans. Well, the guys that invented the Java Master met up with Michael, and they had a slightly different conclusion to what Michael had developed. They felt that when you're roasting large quantities, granted now Michael is using this fluid bed process, you still have a logistics issue, right? Because coffee, scientifically, is stale in 14 days. Now you can introduce nitrogen, you could put it in valve bags. There's lots of things you can do to sort of prolong the time for consumption of the coffee, but it starts getting stale. Bottom line, right? So these guys who invented the Java Master decided that the fluid bed process made a lot of sense, but you need to roast small quantities, 1 to 5 pounds in less than 7 minutes. roast at the point of consumption, i.e. in a coffee shop or grocery store. So the issue of freshness goes completely away. So they basically then work with what Michael had to build the Java Master roasters to roast small batch of coffee at the point of consumption. So that's really what I see as the key difference between the drum and the fluid bed, and sort of the evolution from Michael roasting in large quantities to the previous Java Master owners building Java Master to roast small batch coffee. So that's kind of how I see it. Now, is it better? Is it, you know, and you could make an argument, we could have a debate. I simply say that what our customers and our customers have told them is that the distinct taste, the clean taste, they can tell. They love the coffee. It's different than what they've tasted. It's much, much fresher, and the aroma is to die for.
I want to go back to something for a second. You found a company in Michigan. Is there some magic potion in Michigan? It seems like there's a lot of roasting work that was done in Michigan.
Yeah, well, I mean, I asked I asked the same question too. How did these guys end up in Michigan? Well, you know, the car companies are there. There's a lot of sheet metal companies, a lot of engineers that are there to service the car industry. So we have a lot of resources in engineering and manufacturing in the Detroit area. Now, specifically, the guys that founded Java Master came out of General Motors. These guys were thermal engineers responsible for building catalytic converters for cars to make sure that the cars for the car companies would pass the emission standards that the federal government has set. So these guys were all about cubic feet of airflow and heat. So when they met Michael and saw what Michael was doing, it was very easy for them. And they were in Detroit, and they basically had retired from General Motors, and they were, you know, they were coffee lovers, and they decided, you know what, we can build a better way of roasting or a different way to roast. And so anyway, they had all the background and knowledge, and what Michael was doing was right up their alley. So that's really how it was easy for them to do so. And they built the company in Michigan, and it's always been there. They hand build these roasters actually in Wixom, Michigan. So that's the backdrop as to why Michigan and the expertise that is plentiful over there.
What's ahead?
So you know what we have here is we believe a completely different way to roast coffee, and if we can proliferate. And sometimes people use the word democratize coffee, right? I mean, bring coffee to the mass, bring quality coffee to the mass, to people that may not be sophisticated coffee drink. They just want a good cup of coffee. They want the aroma. They want it fresh. So the way we see going to market is to continue to place these roasters in grocery stores, because that's what the company has done historically. We position the roasters in grocery stores and coffee shops, and then we sell them green beans, which we have a lot of good sources for, including from my farm. So that's the core business model that the company had previously that we will continue. But we also feel that there's a need for us to bring the story directly to consumers. So we were fortunate a couple of years ago to have been introduced to one of the three original founders of Starbucks, a guy by the name of Zev Ziegel. Zev has been fantastic. He's a pro bono advisor to our company. But after he looked at what we're doing, one of the first things he said to us is, you know what, Jacques, you've got a fantastic technology here, but you're selling this technology to different companies. You've got 80 plus units operating at Whole Foods. You've got Lowe's Foods. They see the value of what you're doing, and they've purchased the roasters. But it is not their roaster. They didn't invent the concept. They are using it for strategic reasons for their companies. Whole Foods, for example, it's basically a way for customer retention, right? So if you go to a particular Whole Foods, you will always go there to buy a coffee because you know what you're getting. It's fresh and you don't go anyplace else. That means you're shopping there. So that's Whole Foods strategy, right? Zev said to us, they don't own the roaster. It is not their story, and they will not tell the story the same way as you will tell the story. So I thought about that, and we said, you know what? It makes a lot of sense. What he really was getting to is to have us be involved in the coffee shop business. So serendipitously, a coffee shop became available. We acquired it, transformed it, put our roaster in to sort of engage customers directly and tell our story and see how we could evolve and or begin to expand what we're doing with other coffee shops. And lo and behold, it's been fantastic being able to roast in front of customers, engage them about the green beans and what's going on. So long story short, we see an aspect of what we're doing going into owning coffee shops and hopefully eventually building a franchise organization where we can actually franchise different coffee shops all across the world. And each and one of those stores will have our roasters. And again, we'll be able to roast at the point of consumption, so consumers are always having fresh coffee. So that's a little bit of the future of what we see. Supporting the farmers, buying green beans at a much higher rate so that the farmers don't get marginalized, being able to participate in the process and the quality issues, bringing the coffees into the companies that are using our roasters, and then also participating at the coffee shop level where we get to bring our coffee directly to consumers so that we can tell our story in a much better way than some of the customers that we have that are buying the roasters are doing out there in the market. So there's a little bit about our plans so far. Sort of looks that way.
I heard an inkling from someone that you were maybe working on a consumer roaster in the future.
Yeah, one of the things that we're doing is obviously building a smaller unit that would do, less than a pound. And in so doing, we've come to conclude that the demand for an appliance at the home level for, again, not just average person that can spend $250 to $400 to have an appliance at home to roast at home is very much in demand. So we are developing something along those lines, and we hope to be able to offer units of that sort sometime in the beginning of next year, and so coffee lovers can roast their own coffee at home, and obviously we'll have an infrastructure to supply them the green beans so that they can have their preferred selection of beans to roast. Yeah, so that's definitely something that's in our plans.
I'm very grateful to our mutual friend Tad for kind of introducing us, and thank you for coming on today. This is going to be this is historic because we're to talk about this and to talk about all the things you're doing. There's a number of things that I think you'll have as first, including just having this model and bringing coffee fresher. I know this has been an aim of a number of people over the years who are who can taste and know the difference. And they say the most important thing we could do is get fresh coffee in the hands of more people, and you are literally doing that, sir.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Kevin. I mean, I was really inspired when I met the previous owners of this company, and they also took a liking to me and my background and understanding of the green side of coffee. And I saw the opportunity to bring this technology to market, as again, not as a process that's better or we can go through the debate, but it's just a different way to serve and or to have people taste coffee, and to do so in a way that gets it in the hands of people that are not necessarily sophisticated coffee drinkers. They, again, like you put it before, they just want a good cup of coffee. And we're really thrilled to be able to get this type of a system in place to get as much good quality coffee to as many people as we possibly can.
Jacques has so much content that applies to my interest in promoting at-home fresh coffee, I feel we just scratched the surface. If you're interested in trying the Java Master coffee, there are in-store roasters at various Whole Foods stores. I know Jacques opened a store here in the Chicago area as well as supplies various resellers here. I'm looking forward to doing an on-air tasting soon. I want to publicly thank Jacques for his reaching out, for his sponsorship of these videos, and for his visionary pursuit of coffee freshness. We'll have him back on again soon. I'm Coffee Kevin.